Alright, I know what you're thinking. Who is this guy jumping on a bench thinking that that's gonna work? And I will admit, at the time, I thought it was the most brilliant idea I had to get this bench secured to the bottom. But at the time, I had only built 3 benches in my life. This project's actually been about a year in the making. We put these boards up in the attic, hoping they would cure out and stabilize a little bit before we glued them all together. After having glued and clamped all these pieces together and let the glue cure, I needed to implore a little bit of help getting these boards planed down because they were just so large and awkward. Later on, I found out that all the planer blades were dull, and it was probably not necessary for it to be as difficult as it was, but I did sharpen them up and found it a lot easier. I did actually make a video on how to sharpen planer blades without spending a mint on them. Planer blades and printer cartridges, 2 things that are overly expensive. Alright, let's do a quick mock-up. This bench is going to be pretty wide, a little wider than most workbenches, but I had some huge gaps due to not being able to glue them up perfectly flat, so I had to plane it and joint them to each other. And I started out with a plane, but then found out it was going to be a little bit more practical to just take a saw kerf out of it. So I clamped the 2 boards together, slid a saw between them, and started cutting a kerf down between the 2 pieces of wood. Added a brace, and this seemed to work pretty well. I did end up getting it flat enough to glue together, or squish together, bend together. 4x10s are pretty hard to bend into place, but after that I gave it a quick plane, and it's on to glue up. No turning back now.
Flat is supposed to look like.
Alright, nerve-wracking glue up out of the way, let's plane this piece of ash. This was a board I hand-hewed a while ago. I wasn't on camera, but it's been sitting in the shop. I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. I decided it was going to be the legs for one side of the bench, and then I had some scrap oak to be the other side of the bench legs. I love this saw. It is an indestructible beast of a machine and does a lot of the timber framing I need to do. It is in the plan to have dust collection in the shop, but it just isn't a thing yet. Someday.
How is it still attached? Why attached? Avert your eyes.
I'm a little rusty with the saw, so I'm gonna have to plane this down using hand plane. Now, it wouldn't have been bad to run this through the planer, but I had the live edge on the other side, and I kind of wanted to keep the live edge just as a unique thing in the shop, so I decided it was worth the sweat and the sharpening.
So this is somewhat of a testament to how much I had to remove to get those boards flat. Alright, after doing some maths and cutting these all to size, I have determined that we are going to cut a mortise, right here, and we are going to come up 10 inches from the floor, and that will be our shelf at the bottom, and then we'll come up about the height of a 2x4 up this, and this will be our mortise right here.
Alright, let's address the pink elephant in the room and acknowledge that I do mix my metaphors. I am using a blacksmith's hammer for a jointer's mallet. Go ahead and write in the comments what strange tools you use that don't usually get used that way.
So this is the other side of the mortises I'm doing, and my chisel came through. on the last pole I was doing. So yeah, we're going to be gluing this leg back together, unfortunately, but it'll still work. It'll still stand up to everything I need it to. Just a little disappointed. Wasn't paying attention well enough. Went all the way through. It happens. Okay, I went a little overkill with the glue, but we're going to ignore that. I'd rather have too much in there than not enough. Glue's cheap, but not that cheap. Could have been worse. Could have had a bigger blowout, blow out in a different spot. Always could have been worse. Little unconventional, but yes, we're going to have to break the pencil off, but I need something to transfer the pressure a little bit more evenly, and that's going to work perfectly. Problem is, I don't have any more pencils. Yes, this clamp is completely overkill. Actually, I can do this way. Just do this way. Use one. So I don't think we got film of me cutting these to length, but they're here, and these are going to be the long pieces that go between the legs to keep everything nice and rigid.
So most sane human beings would probably write up plans of some sort or have an idea of what they want, but here I just wanted something heavy, so I didn't have a really good idea of what the base was going to look like. I just knew I wanted at least 4 inches worth of wood on the top. So I just found some old 2x4s and started cutting them and mortising them into the legs that I had cut out of the live edge lock I had. Alright, I have a question for those of you who don't live in the Midwest. Ash. People have told me they use ash as axe handles. But what type of ash do you have, and do you use it as axe handles? Because although this is off subject to the video, I have constantly had trouble using ash from the Midwest area for axe handles or anything that requires a certain amount of stress or shock. As hammer handles, axe handles, I've always had it shatter right at the head, and I've rounded out the transition from the head to the handle, but it's never been enough. And I've always had it break. I've tried having it a little thick. It's always been an issue. So I'm calling out to the internet. If anybody knows, let me know.
Alright, a few more to go. So I made a mistake. I messed it up. I put the mortises on the wrong side of the line that I drew, which was the distance between the 2 mortises, and now it's 7 inches off of where they need to be. 6, 7, something like that. I'll figure out the details. But anyway, I have 2 ways of fixing it. One is to plug these holes, which is a lot of work, and I already put a lot of work into it. My other option is I cut the stringer piece that goes between the 2 legs and shorten it and put a new mortise in it and a new tendon and shorten it to this length. Will it hurt anything? I kind of doubt it. Maybe my pride. But other than that, I'm not going to get hindered. It's just, yeah, measure twice, cut once. Sometimes you cut on the wrong side of the line and it's upsetting, but at least in this situation, I have the opportunity to fix it. And by the way, the reason I'm not showing you this on the actual project is because the bench top weighs at least as much as I do, and it's hard to move it around and give you a visual, and I only want to move this once, preferably, when I put it together.
Looking back on this mistake, I'm pretty glad I made it shorter because it's actually gonna work better inside the shop with places to store stuff underneath the bench and to the side of the bench. Like now I have a little box of sandpaper that kind of sits underneath the bench on one side of it, and it wouldn't have fit otherwise. So it all worked out pretty well. It was just kind of a setback in the moment. Now we finally get to put it all together and see how it looks. So at this point in the build, I was a little desperate and the glue was starting to freeze up on me. So I went ahead and jumped on the table to try and get it to seat, because the axe was not doing it. And at this point in history, we didn't have the sledgehammer that we had built, so this was my next best option. At this point in the build, I needed a temporary permanent solution for a vise. I needed to get some work done, so I decided, alright, let's take a vise off of one of my other benches and stick it on here as a temporary solution. It's going to make a little bit more of a permanent stay later on, but I haven't gotten to that later on part yet.
Could have made that a little easier for myself. Thread this through.
Alright, let's give it a quick sand and then put the whole table to use. I started out with 60 grit, or was it 30 grit? I think it was 30 grit on the belt sander, and it eats sawdust. I had a 1/4 inch of sawdust just plastered on my sweater. Now, I was wearing a mask, but I still didn't really like how dusty everything was afterwards. There will be a dust collection system one of these days. So I would have liked to go with just a plain old tung oil finish, but I had this hybrid stuff that had some polyurethane mixed in with it, and I figured that would do just fine. So you may notice there is a vise on this side of the bench that we did not show in this video. That's because it was filmed as a short. I'll link it down in the description. It's a short video on how we restored this old vise. Hope you enjoyed the video and thank you for watching. This was a fun project.